Welcome back to another episode of On Coaching with Magness and Marcus. I'm Steve Magness, the University of Houston cross-country coach, Deputy Director of High Performance West, joined by my good friend John Marcus, Director of High Performance West, and by our repeat guest, our host of the most downloaded episode ever on this podcast, and the newly crowned national champion, Mike Smith of NAU. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on again, Steve. Thanks, John.
Our pleasure, Mike. Thanks for keeping your promise and coming back post-NCAAs to unpack and discuss the remainder of the season. Last time we talked about a month ago. Lots changed.
It's been a crazy last couple of days since the race on Saturday. So it's good to kind of sit down and put some thoughts together on it. So looking forward to this conversation.
So yeah, I like retrograde thinking, so we'll start at the end. Let's start, this day, today, 3 days out from winning the NCAA title as a team in cross. Where are you guys collectively as a team? Is your mindset, hey, taking a break? Or are you guys already, hey, today's day one for the 2018 run? How have you positioned this for the men as you guys look to defend back-to-back national titles here for the next season?
Yeah, they're on a much deserved break, taking some downtime and relaxing a bit. They've got I think when you're trying to do a big, something big as a team, there's a big emotional come down that I think they don't realize exactly the line they've been riding as a group for all these months until maybe it's done, and so. There's a lot of exhaustion, happy exhaustion, but a lot of exhaustion at the end of it. So on a much needed rest right now. We'll regroup. We'll regroup in the coming weeks.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your own personal, energy levels. I know it's, as people say, the last day of cross country is the first day of track. As director of a prestigious program like NAU, where are you at? How do you collectively recoup after such a successful run in the fall as you guys look to have the Jacks competing here indoors and outdoors on the track?
Yeah, I think that's something I did a good job of this fall was making sure that I was taking good care of myself and trying to get the rest that I could and having times when I was unavailable or kind of checking out a little bit just to make sure I was really in tune when I needed to be. And I'll use the same here coming off this season. I'm really short on sleep, and I think I just need to recharge a bit. So I'm going to visit some friends, and get some time on the beach, and then get back to Flagstaff. Flagstaff itself is just a great place to recharge in general if you can get out of the office. So do some things locally, be ready to regroup and go back at it.
And well deserved. So
appreciate it.
Take us through your oral recount of the NCAA championships. Just as now you've had a little space and a little time to decompress and let the emotions settle. Going into that championship 40 hours before the race, during the race, and immediately after. Kind of walk us through as best you can, or as you recall, your interpretation of events and when it kind of actually sunk in that, you and this band of brothers at NAU did what is very difficult to do, repeat and defeat a very competitive, very fit, very able group of teams and individuals to repeat as champions.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. I don't know if I'm biased or I just remember it wrong, but I don't remember such analysis of two teams. In the other team being BYU, Portland ended up second with a great run. Kudos to those guys, by the way, just fantastic coaching and just a great season there. But yeah, going into this thing, all this BYU NAU stuff, and it was funny because just in our camp, our guys, I didn't really ever hear them talking about BYU, and I would this stuff about BYU and NAU, and then I'd hear the guys would show me whatever social media from BYU talking all about NAU, and I was like, maybe we're about to get, maybe there's something I don't know, but people seem super focused on, all this analysis between these two teams, and it just was so much. It was so much talk, so much like these scenarios. That one of the BYU coaches had this like blog thing report about his predictions, and it just was really weird to me. And I just remember that I was really proud of our guys just staying out of that stuff. We just didn't. They just didn't really participate in that. And I was, and I think we just came really, really focused on what it would take to win, not who was going to win. And
unpack that a little bit. What did you guys elect to focus on? Since you weren't listening to all the buzz and chatter and pundits.
Yeah.
In your camp, leading into the spaces, in the quiet spaces, right? On the flight, at the hotel, van rides, like what were you guys really intent on?
So I think a lot of it's just like knowing your group, and I know our guys, we got really dependable guys. I mean, I think we talk a lot about if you can't be great, be good, right? And so our range of outcomes I thought was pretty controlled. We were running a freshman that had not run 10K. There was a little bit of a variable there. Corey Glines was kind of coming on, but for the most part, I mean, we're showing up to that meet feeling pretty confident that the range of outcomes was from here to here. It was a pretty contained range of outcomes. Like when you're, Tyler and Matt, I mean, I knew what they were going to do. Those other guys are really solid in there. And so I think when you work on that ahead of time, it allows you to arrive to the meet with a lot less unknown. And so we show up pretty relaxed, and then the whole key is keeping them relaxed. And like in our group, if there's a lot of laughing and joking and they're kind of loud, I know we're good. And so what you're listening for is the silence. What you're listening for is them to get tense. And my job is, we talked about this I think the last podcast we did, but just balancing that energy. John, you called it the dance. Just sort of paying attention to where that energy is and making sure we're keeping it in the right place. And so our travel and stuff, I felt like things were really, really good, and they were exactly how I would want them to be pre-race. They were pretty loose and pretty relaxed. So that was the first checkpoint for us. 48 hours out, 24 hours out, we went and played a game. Day before I think, yeah. And again, really loose there. And all that's time that we're not talking about the race, not thinking about the race. And so I think again that allows you to perform in that state of flow.
So leading up to it, if you're not doing much talking about the race and all that stuff, at what point did you maybe distill what needed to be done? Like, was that weeks out, months out? Like, this is the expectations? Is there any talk of strategy, anything like that, leading into it?
Yeah, I talk about like how you learn as a coach. So at Georgetown, I used to do these like big team meetings the night before the race, and they could be like 45 minutes long, and I'm talking all about all these different, all the different elements of the race. I stopped doing that a couple years ago, and try to make sure that we gave those directions far out, because the athletes need to create a picture in their mind and be settled with that and not have a lot of unknown. And so it's better to give them, paint a really clear scenario of what we're looking at as far out as we can. So in the airport, coming off the mountain regional race, so we're 8 days out from nationals, I huddled them up and I said, here's how we're going to run the race at nationals. This is what we're going to do. And it wasn't a very long conversation. I gave them, we had been analyzing, my coaching staff had been analyzing the 2012 Louisville race, the 2015 Louisville. We picked apart those results. We watched a lot of video. We had been to Louisville twice. I videoed a lot of pieces of the course. We had done our work, so it's not to say that the only work of coming up with this plan is the 5-minute conversation. we were doing that for months and months and months, coming up with how to do this. And when we issue the directives, that's a pretty quick conversation. So that was 8 days out. We said that we were going to basically move into 2 groups and give them their assignments. And so they had that. And then by the time we get to the race, we don't really have to go over that much. I have some individual conversations about, are you clear on what we're asking you to do? Yes. And then we're good to go.
Mike, have you read the book, The Education of a Coach, about Bill Belichick?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, that's a great book, because what you just said reminded me a lot of Bill Belichick, where there was a lot of film, there was a lot of study and analysis on the coach's part before you gave a very clear, concise, simple game plan. And I think sometimes if you're ill prepared, with what you want to do, as maybe you were in a younger incarnation of yourself at Georgetown, you try to create this train of thought on the fly. And we know that on the fly just doesn't work. So kudos to you for that evolution, but you just remind me a lot of Bill Belichick. Lots of film, lots of nuance, lots of detail, very, very clear imagery on your part, and then you're able to communicate that to your charge, but it looks like, to great effect and impact.
Yeah, I plan out. I mean, if you plan out what you're going to say, 3 minutes of talking is a long time. I mean, if you're really simple and really concise, 5 minutes of talking is a lot of talking. And it's when it's not planned out that you go on and you have the chance to maybe miscommunicate or get mixed messages and things like that. And so I've been planning out a lot more of my words and just trying to be as simple and concise as possible.
Well, when we plan out, also we tend to ramble, right? And then you don't know what the athletes are going to pick up, because a lot of times you go through 4 or 5 different messages and they might pick up on one and ignore the others, or pick up on something you didn't intend to. And I think like that message there for coaches is a huge take home. It's like, know exactly what you're trying to get across first and then plan around that, because athletes sitting there in the night before the race or whenever it is can misconstrue things easily.
So speaking of clarity and brevity, unpack, if you will, gas.
Oh yeah. Well, that's been something that's been around for a little while. That wasn't just for this race. A couple years ago, I was really trying to find the words for when y'all are coaching someone and you're trying to verbalize relaxing, right? The lack of tension, so actual tangible what relaxing is in the body, without correlating that with decelerating, right? You can imagine it, right? So you're like, relax, and then next time they come around the track in the workout, you're like, oh, nope, that's a slow split, right? So How can we relax without decelerating? And so I was trying to find verbiage for that, and in that I kind of came to using these labels of gas, on the gas and off the gas, and I guess when we're coming off the gas, that's what I would call deceleration, right? And so trying to actually find words to talk to athletes about how to stay on the gas, to kind of push that threshold. Steve Jones talks about it. Steve Jones is big on when he was racing like in the 80s, they didn't have GPS and all that. And so he talks about how he would just learn what it was like to just sort of ride this line, like ride this razor's edge of his threshold, and to just stay on the gas. These guys are so aerobically strong that if they decelerate, they come off the gas, it's really easy to turn something into a tempo run. And so when I'm telling them gas, they know what that means. They know that what it means is don't settle in. It means just stay, keep applying pressure. And so through that language of working with me as a coach, they know what I mean by that. We're just kind of using common vocabulary, but it's kind of a ridiculous thing to just say to the athletes, just stay on the gas. It just sounds like suicidal. So there's like,
but I like it because it means keep applying the pressure. You're tired, apply the pressure. If it's hard, apply the pressure. If there's a gap, apply the pressure. If you have a gap, keep applying the pressure, because that's what racing's about. And so often we give in to the gremlins, or the athlete gives into a gremlins, like, oh, it's hard, it's windy, it's muddy. I'll make up the gap in like 5-10 steps, or I'll make up the gap in the next mile, like on that hill. But you and I and Steve, we all know that that's a suicidal thought, even though it's a thought that is supposed to be more like relaxing and encouraging to an athlete. It ends up they backslide into the sloppy thought that then results in an outcome that is not aligned with what they intended to do race day.
Right. Yeah. So it's we joke a lot, and so I would tell, especially when you're a lot of times in the season you got athletes that aren't sharp necessarily, don't have a lot of gears, and so how they have to race is, it's like, they're going to have to run pretty evenly throughout a race, and so they want all these crazy intricate race plans. We talked about that before, and it's like, what's the race plan? The race plan is one word: gas. And then we talk a lot about empowering them what to, make sure they know what to do inside the race. And so I would tell them, hey, whenever you're unsure, what's the answer? Gas. And so they're used to my language there. And for the two guys in the front, that was we knew we had been training them for that all season. We had been planning for that kind of attack all year. We sent them out in September at Louisville, specifically to practice for this. So 2 months before that race, we were practicing what we were going to do in that race. We sent them out in 4:31 or whatever it was, and we sent them out in our conference meet. That we used that conference meet as a preparation specifically for Louisville, sending them out like that. And then the last thing we did, I think maybe 3 weeks before the race, I thought that thing was going to go out in 4:30, and I was like, I need to have them touch something faster than that. So we took them down to Sedona, and we did a workout where we had a bunch of intervals, but we had them in the 420 range for a couple miles, at 4,000 feet, and so that was the last bit of callousing that I thought they were ready to do that, and so we knew they could apply pressure, and it's a safe plan because even if they came off that pace, those guys were going to get 7th or 9th. They weren't going to get 150th. So we knew that it was really safe what they were doing.
So take us through the improvisation of dealing with the wind in Louisville. I know no one really maybe planned for such. So you get there, you realize, man, it's going to be windy, thunderstorms coming. So that improv and how you communicate to your team and staying aligned with your race plan and your strategy, and not letting that be a limiting factor to what you guys wanted to execute during the race.
Yeah, so we pay attention to the weather. Starting 2 weeks out, it's funny when you're picking apart a forecast, and it's like, this is 12 days away. You're like going crazy about it. You feel pretty ridiculous, but it was amazing. That storm cell was kind of coming right. It was like Friday was supposed to be nice, Sunday was supposed to be nice, man. Saturday was. At one point they're saying like 40-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. The wind was the real issue. The temperature was actually great, and I think the temperature may have been, could have been either too hot, too cold, could have been more of a detriment. But the wind, the temperature was actually fine. The wind, we knew that we were going to send two guys to take the pace. I just told those guys, hey, look, this is going to be even harder for what you're going to do, but the rewards might be even greater because to beat us as a team, I was pretty confident we were going to have two guys score in the top 10, and to beat us as a team, you cannot miss the break. If there's a break in that pack, just because with wind like that, how are you going to bridge that gap? Grant Fisher can maybe bridge that gap. Maybe a couple people in that field can do that, not many. And so we knew that if we could get a jump on them early and you missed the bus leaving the station, it was going to be really, really hard. And I told you, if those guys die off, they're not dying off that much. The margin of error is pretty small. So I thought the rewards could be great if we applied the strategy correctly. And it happened pretty early. About 2K in, we saw about 10, 12 athletes, but there was no one from BYU in that group. And so again, just doing the math and the team scores, that's a fatal flaw pretty early when it comes to team strategy. And so I let those guys know, hey, there's a gap, there's a break, there's no one from BYU in this group. The only thing you can do wrong now is slow it down and bring people back in it. if you stay on it, there's no way they're going to catch you guys. And so they they ran that middle 4K in the middle of that. I mean, I would love to see a split on that, but they ran that hard knowing that they were going to get away, and it ended up working out.
So that brings up a good point here, is when you're coaching in the middle of it, what kind of cues, what are you giving your athletes?
Yeah, I would say in track and field or cross country, you better not plan on relying on a lot of verbal cues, because it doesn't take long until you get to a big enough venue where they can't hear you, they can't see you, all those things. So cross country is an absolutely it's an absolute chaotic Wild West type of event where people are sprinting and running, and you can actually say some things to them. I like to think that we had prepared them well enough ahead of time that they knew what to do. The only problem is they can't see, necessarily what's going on behind them. And so my verbal cues to them inside there were letting them know what's going on behind them. And we had talked enough about Matt and Tyler knew that if there was a break, that was going to be part of our plan to apply pressure. I think at that moment I just let them know that we had a 10 or 12 athletes had gotten away a little bit, and there was no one that covered that move, and if they stayed on it, we're good. And later on in the race, I think I maybe used some other choice words, adjectives, to get their attention. But yeah, I just let them know basically if they stayed on it, we were okay. But there's not a whole lot you can say.
Yeah. Let's zoom back out a little bit. We've talked a little bit about it in the race, but several times here you've mentioned riding the line, whether that's in the race or also in the season. And I wanted to hear maybe how you managed to ride that line for so many months with big competitions that you guys raced, obviously conference regionals, all that stuff. But how do you keep guys from, going a touch over? Right, because you see that at nationals all the time.
Yeah. I think it's always keeping a handle on the knob that is your physical intensity, and then the knob that is your mental, emotional, and being really, really careful when we're turning those knobs. And I look back at the training in the summer, and it's highly aerobic. Most of them are at altitude. It's a lot of volume. They're running a lot, but there's nothing in there that is from an intensity standpoint that's asking a whole lot. And then when you look at the season plan from August till November, man, there's outside of the races, there's maybe 2, 3, 4 times throughout 3 months where they're having to really emotionally go to a pretty challenging place in training. And I don't know, I just, I think I said this last time to you guys, I just think that's a mistake that we're using a lot of that ammunition in training because we're making stuff too hard for them. And so, and physically, yes, they can do it, but if emotionally that well is tapped, it doesn't matter if they can do it physically. And so, we managed to have them healthy and really well prepared, but that emotional well was not tapped. And they got up for Wisconsin and, a couple workouts maybe, but really they were still had a lot of place to go from an emotional standpoint by the time we get to NCAAs.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, Mike, because recently that's been a running theme for my coaching practices with everybody, reminding them, look, I want your emotional gas tank at full on race day, not 2/3, not a quarter tank, full. And if that means you have to compromise some difficult training sessions to ensure that emotional gas tank is very high, then so be it. And because it's a soft thing, this quote-unquote emotional gas tank, we as coaches have a lot of hard time putting numbers or confidence in it because it's not, we can't track it on a watch or a monitor of some sort. We don't have any stern analytics, and I think that is a disservice overall to people we work with, because that's what performance is. There is a key emotional element to every competitor and championship competitor that I've ever been around or had access to. I was having coffee with Alan Webb this weekend, and we were reminiscing about his racing career a little bit, and that's one thing we hit on. He's an emotional guy, and it's one of those emotions where it can either warm the house or burn it down. But when it was warming the house, you'd see it in his eyes, in his face, when he won Paris, or when he set the American record, or won a U.S. title, or beat like Legat in their rivalry. And that was a thing that you could not take away. If you took that away from him, he was not as effective. And I think too, we need to pay homage to that reality. And one key consideration when you do workouts, or as you integrate tough sessions, quote unquote, or tough races into your preparation program, is to consider the emotional tax, because there is an emotional tax, and we know too that distress takes some time to refuel, and it takes some time that battery takes time to recharge, and sometimes it's a couple days, and sometimes a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up Alan, because like the year I trained with him, that's probably the biggest thing that I noticed is like he would drain that emotional battery in practice a lot, like during the championship season, and a lot of times I think that was his big downfall, because the way I like to conceptualize it or tell my athletes is there's only so many times we can go and see God, right? There's only so many times we can dip into that well, and whether it's in practice or race or something else, like it takes a while to come back out of it. And it, once you've kind of drained it for a season, it takes like full refresh, rejuvenation to do it. And like we actually try and quantify it a bit just by subjectiveness, like in addition to how they rate how physically demanding a workout is, like we just have it essentially how emotionally demanding was this, like how focused, how much did you have to dig to get things done? Because it's funny, and looking at some of that rough data is sometimes there's some demanding emotional workouts that aren't that hard physically because they have other things going on in their life. And if I didn't take that into consideration, then like I could be draining that kid's battery without without even knowing it.
Yeah, context is king, without a doubt. But Mike, there was a moment in an interview I saw after NCAAs where you talked about emotional control, and that your men were very much in emotional control. So maybe let's go a little bit deeper on this thread real quick. How did you help infuse them with that confidence that allowed them to be emotionally controlled in the wild crucible that is the NCAA Cross Country Championships, which we were talking about before offline? There's only one race like that the whole year. It's the race. It's very difficult to prepare for that beast with any kind of replication of racing or practice. So, and your men did that too very well, and hats off. But I'm curious what that process looked like to get them to that point.
Yeah, I think that's just from those are things I learned from probably doing it the wrong way myself as an athlete, and then just watching the mistakes of other people. And that I think you got to really learn that event. And like you said, there's nothing like it. And I wish it was a sport where the rah, the crazy speeches and doing this for your brothers and all this stuff. I wish that, I think that almost would be cooler if that like really there was a direct parallel to that. I just think really well intentioned, that puts people, that really sends people into the wrong place. And so instead of wasting my time on, I wish I could, give some, deliver, have them in this kind of out-of-body experience, like thing. Instead of wasting my time on that, I just really try to master what the event is and how to do it correctly. And it sounds, probably if you listen to the way I talk to them, it really sounds like I'm downplaying it. Like, if you're a senior and this is your last college cross-country race and you got a chance, your team has a chance to win it, and your coach is telling you, hey man, just try to be good, don't even try to be great, it doesn't sound very exciting. It doesn't sound very, but again, it's really trying to master what this event is. And so, again, like, I thought we had an opportunity with BYU when all the stuff I would read, and it was all this stuff about winning, and it's like, we're not going to do that. And we just, it's the same way, like, you don't, you can dream the wrong dream. You can paint this picture of turning the corner with 800 meters to go, and the sun is shining, and your girlfriend is at the finish line, and you sprint away, and you win it for your team. Okay, well, 3 minutes into the NCAA cross-country meet, it's not going to be like that.
Yeah.
Right? And
life's messy. Life's very messy.
Right. And so instead we spend with our guys, it's like, hey, you're going to be in 55th place, and you got 2K to go, and it hurts. Let's dream that dream, right? Let's make that picture. That's, hey, we're going to be out in 14:30 for 5K. You're going to be buried back there. You have no idea what's going on. You're going to be, what are you going to do now? And we spend our time talking about that. And I think that's what I mean when I say emotional control. It's really painted. The night before, I don't give any crazy speeches. We gather them up ahead of time. I said, hey, you're prepared. You trust the work. You're ready to do what we're asking you to do. And we say, 3, 2, 1, Jacks, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy nowadays to get caught up in the hype. There's so much more hype available at one's fingertips than ever before.
Well, and it's also, I think, a little bit over coaching, right? Like, sometimes as a coach, I remember making this mistake when I was younger. It's like you have this need to do something. And something is like, oh, it's the night before. Like, I got to get these guys in the right moment and get them jacked up and excited and all that stuff. And you go on this long speech and rah-rah stuff, or the scene before a race, right? Sometimes you give that pre-race huddle speech just because you feel like, oh, I have to do something, rather than just as an athlete would say, hey, I have the confidence, I'm prepared. As a coach, sometimes you need to be, I have the confidence, I'm prepared. So on that note, we talked a little on the night before. What does that like hour leading up to race start look like for you guys? Or what did it look like?
I looked over and Tyler Day was laying on the ground in the tent, and he just had his eyes closed. He was just playing air guitar. I always remember that. I'm careful to stay out of their way. In the hour before, I give my staff really clear directions as to basically not talk to them. And again, it's overcoaching. It's getting out of the way. If we're at the NCAA cross country championships and I gotta psych you up, we got much bigger problems. Exactly. It's like, it's not. I gotta bring you down, and I get a moment with each of them, and I pull them aside, each of them, and I sort of just survey, kind of read their energy, and kind of feel where they are. And I always say, in the hour before this one, I asked each of them the same question. I said, tell me what you want to do, and basically make them recite back to me what they planned on doing. And so I pulled Tyler Day out there and said, well, tell me what you're going to do. And he said, gas. I said, okay. And, get Peter Lamong out there. Peter Lamong finished 8th place. He was like 40-something at Wisconsin. He just said, I'm going to go get position. We talked a lot about what the positioning in Louisville. We knew from researching the 2012-2015 race that if we were winning at 2K, I would call it a 60-40 chance we were going to win. If we were winning at 4K, 50-50, and if we're winning at halfway, I'd say it's 70-30 we're going to win. And so we told them that, hey, positioning early on is really important. So they recited back where they needed to be position-wise. We think position is what you do in the first 400. Positioning on that Louisville course, how it narrows out, is what you're doing the whole first 10 minutes of the race. And so they recite back to me sort of early on what they're going to do. Pete Lamong told me his positioning, sound great. And then we leave him alone. And we give them that moment to concentrate and be with each other, and the coaching is done way before the meet. So
yes, it resonates a lot with me because we are in, people might call it preseason competition, preparation, whatever, for a lot of the track, middle distance athletes for indoors now, right? We're here in November. This is when I am coaching the most. This is when I am just coaching. A lot of psychology, a lot of build-up. I mean, it's extensive and exhaustive. And if we do, I always remind the athlete too, if I do my job correctly, the morning of the race, I'm having an espresso and just doing that, 1-2 quick simple words and you're ready to go. Because if you have to get to the race and continue to coach with everything you got before the athlete starts on line, you're rushing. You know that it's sloppy work, and you know that you haven't done enough in the build-up to get them into the space they want. So appreciate you affirming that. I mean, it's sometimes we forget.
Honestly, like, that's one of the best things that I've learned about coaching collegiately and then having post-collegiate athletes go wander off throughout the year is, like, I can't tell you how many times I've not talked to an athlete before a race, before big races, even before marathons, because, like, I'm in Houston, someone's running New York, and, I'm not even going to call them before sometimes, besides maybe, hey, good luck, because everything's done at that point, and you shouldn't need that hand-holding to the line, and if you do, then you messed up somewhere on the preparation side.
Yeah, I completely, it's over coaching, and I think well-intentioned, but it's like this feeling of, it's really an expression of your nerves and your anxiety as a coach, not necessarily that there's actually tangibly something to do.
Right, and I think too, I want to get into that Barack Obama quote you share with your team, where you have to make this distinction between you and the work, because it's the work that we've showed up to do. It's not a measure of you as a human being and your validity on this planet Earth. It's a measure of your preparation for the work. So, if you will, Mike, take us through how that quote came into your consciousness, and then how you applied it and presented it to your team for the NCAA championships.
Yeah, I'll actually minor correction. That was I didn't share it with the team. I just shared it with my staff.
Okay.
Yeah, but but I think it's still really important that it's coaches, and this is, I think, in your podcast, when you have a lot of listeners who are coaches, and they're working with kids and athletes, and so I shared it with my staff over coffee the morning of the race, and I would say it to any listeners that are coaches right now, that the quote basically says that if you make it about you're going to get stuck and you're going to get frustrated, and if you make it about the work, then you'll always see your path. And I was saying that because I've been talking a lot to my assistant coaches throughout the year of releasing ourselves from outcomes, releasing ourselves from having to win and having to repeat. And it sounds like, you're taking the pressure off yourself, and not that at all. It's we certainly want to win, but I way before I got to the national meet had to let go of winning, and way before. And I think that's the part that really aligns with you. Well, if it's about me, then I have to create some resume as a coach, and that's not why I'm doing this. I don't think that's why you two are doing this. We're in this for the work, and if we just make sure that we're focused on the work, we can get second or third or 29th at the national meet. I feel really good about what our work is doing as far as how it's moving these people in their lives at their young ages, and that's what we got to stay focused on.
So I love that. There's a really good book written by Matthew Crawford called Shop Craft is Soul Craft, where he talks about the value of work in that same line of thinking. So a good read if listeners want to jump into that. But so from an athlete standpoint, how do you get that message across to the athletes, right? Because especially in modern day and in today's society, and I feel old saying that, but like so much of our success is defined by these external outcomes, whether it's like likes on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or times and PRs or wins and all that stuff, and we're almost like inundated with the outcome is all that matters. How do you combat that and get them to have that different mindset?
Yeah, you couldn't have said that better. That's definitely the virus that we're fighting against, and I think a lot of it is how you're speaking to them, what you're rewarding, what you're praising, and sometimes it's just like putting in a bookmark. It's just like putting in like a little, like a tab saying like come back and come back to this and you'll make sense of it later. If I can't get them to understand it right now, it's at least giving them the folding the page over where they can refer to it later. I think it's reminding them that none of these outcomes are that bizarre. None of them are that, that if it's the outcome they're seeking, you seek the outcome through the process and really making note, really clarifying, making sure that no one can just gloss over the process. We had 10 guys travel out there. 8 of the 10 stayed at altitude all summer long and ran 1 million miles a week up at 9,000 feet. And, a couple months later, they're on the bus. It's just so reminding them, hey, no one's just lucky and talented, and what were you doing on August 1st, and what were you doing, and so really trying to make note to them of showing them, uncovering those little pieces of the process, I think.
Yeah, it's difficult in this day and age to think that the shiny things are, game changers, and they're not. I remind people, a tweet never changed the world.
No.
An Instagram post never changed the world. That's not where the work lies. It's the latest form of distraction. They were saying the same thing about TV when it first showed up, same thing about radio, same thing about magazine ads, right? And I think that, investment in craft, that investment of just coming to, practice every day, getting a little bit better every day, drip by drip. It's like coffee in the morning. That's how it's made, drip by drip by drip. And then soon enough, you have this full, delicious cup of coffee that fuels you and gets you going and on with your day. Same deal here, right? So my curiosity, though, Mike, is now you guys had a very dominant season. Lots of winning took place from a result outcome at invitationals, conference, regionals, and now nationals back to back. How do you defend moving forward in what Pat Riley calls, the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers and Miami Heat, the disease of more? And I'll unpack that real quick. In the book Showtime, I talked about the Lakers in the mid-'80s when Riley was the coach with Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They had a lot of success, and then you get this disease of more, where people start focusing on more of the wrong things. So more playing time, more endorsements, more kudos. And, in distance running world, it's more miles, more success, more, All-Americans, more. That's a very real peril that a lot of champions face down the road, and not everyone meets it with success. In fact, many get derailed by it. So, what are some thoughts or strategies that you have in place to now keep these guys centered, level-headed, but also prepared on the next tasks, so that you don't have this crater that develops because you now have these 2 big trophies hanging or placed in the mantle or the trophy case as you walk into practice every day?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that. I think this is a real test of coaching right now, and because you see how this happens, right? It's like the attributes that got someone to where they are the first ones to be lost when you get there, right? And so you got these like hungry, scrappy teams that bond together around a goal, and then you get there, and the real, I think, challenge is how do you keep those really special virtues that had you arrive there. There's Alan Watts, Zen writer, talks a lot about like the plague of self-improvement and how framing self-improvement, this whole idea that in our modern culture that we always have to get better. We're obsessed with like we we always are framing ourselves in a state of problem that must be improved, and how it prevents us from actually being where we are right here, and how it divides us from the self that must be improved to the one seeking the improvement, and how it divides the self. And I think it's a really interesting concept. It's possible to just say that, to make note of how we got to where we are, and make sure that we really hold true to those principles. It's not glamorous. Path told me, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah, famous Zen quote, right?
Before
enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Chop wood, carry water. And it's, so how do we go back to, especially in this sport that requires such monotony, like, I always laugh when they're coming up with some new documentary about following around some new professional runner, and it's talk about, do you want me to fall asleep? Do you know what these people the life of these people is like? Okay, I ran, I took a nap, I woke up and ran, and one time this year I stayed up past 10 p.m. and and so especially in a sport where there's such monotony, we have to return to that monotony. We got to return to Buffalo Park and Waterline Road, and as quickly as we can forget about being the national champions, the better.
Right. Yeah, it's always difficult too, because now the guy who was fifth, who was a junior, now wants to be the man, because he feels like he had sometimes a key hand in the delivery of that championship. And so too, it's like you have a bunch of young men who are growing and developing and getting a sense of self in the world, and there is ego involved, because that's just what you have to do to help create a clearer sense of self. Now in the context of track, how do you create a bridge to leverage, the track's a little bit more individualized, a little bit more focused, but then tie it back to, because I know you plan far in advance, next fall, so that the guys can still maintain that sense of cohesion and support, but also to find their time to shine, so that then they can come back into the fold and be a band of brothers again that are aligned on this journey in 2018.
Yeah. Well, I think track cross country cycle is really important. What makes a great cross country runner is coming off great track season, and I'd be surprised to see someone that really is going to put it together on the track that in the long term that couldn't make at least some personal progress in cross country. And so I think it's perfect that we're kind of coming off this cross country season, because the next thing to go to is, like you said, sort of some of that more individual, what's next for this person, what are the next needs? Do we need to, some of these guys, we need to get them faster, we need to lower some volume a little bit, and and so some of them have to just build tactical awareness. We need to just get them into races so they can work themselves out of problems, and some of them need to just invest from taking risks and some of these longer things. So really looking at what's next on their hierarchy of needs and their to-do lists, and being able to give them those opportunities without staying too far from the mission of the special things we can do together as a group.
So let's unpack that a little bit in terms of details. Like what's it look right now? What's the break look like? When do you guys kind of regroup and start that build for track as a team and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, again, just we have to give them a big emotional reset. At the same time, we don't want them to completely stop running. I think we keep the body in a certain physical rhythm. We need them to get rested, but we don't want the body to close off, and so we have to keep things moving. We give them some days off, but we ask them to sort of keep on short, slow runs for a couple weeks here. So we'll give them 2 weeks of running 4 to 5 days a week of anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, maybe one longer run, and making sure that we're keeping the hip joint, the ankle joint open throughout that whole time. I've had a bunch of people get hurt coming off of breaks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't make any, it didn't take me long. It took me the second year of that to be like, all right, wait a second, something isn't right here. But I think, again, the body closes up, and now you got an ankle that's not moving, and you got a hip that's not moving. Then you go, all right, well, now you're coming off a break. Now let's go train hard again, and the body's not moving correctly. And so...
is that accomplished for you just through daily running, or are you doing like maybe some light plyometrics on a box jump state triple extension, or how does that look?
Well, again, I got to be careful what I'm asking them to do that looks like practice, right? And so if I give them anything too complicated, I feel like it's an ask. And so we've got a great, really basic active isolated stretching routine that takes 10 minutes, that covers all the basic movements that I want to stay open in the body. We ask them to keep on that. We have some barefoot walks that we ask them to keep to. We'll turn over just a little bit with some strides, but we don't want them doing anything. It's like we don't want them doing anything that feels like, well, the only reason I'm doing this is I'm being asked to do it. We got to save that ammunition. So we don't have them do anything too complicated, but we want a good, healthy break, and then even when they get back, we'll so after about 2 weeks, we'll have them meet, but we won't work them out, and so that gives you another week, a third week. And I mean, I just think you can't ask. The NCAA system is a you gotta be really, really careful, because there's an opportunity for you to go, to really hit it. I don't know. I'd say 8 out of 12 months a year. You can be. Like when I was at Georgetown, I'd be like, you got to get them qualified for indoors, so that's in January or February, and then you got to run indoors, well, that's in March, the indoor NCAAs. Then you got Penn Relays in April, and you got to get them qualified. You got regionals in May, nationals in June. You can't have them going all year round like that. And so we're going to have to pass up on some things, and that's okay. We're going to take a good crack at the fall, and we'll have them really ready for outdoor track. We'll give them one good shot indoors at something maybe, but we're not going to chase anything. And I just got to be okay with leaving some stuff on the table. And what's hard for them is when they're really fired up and they're fit and they're excited. Like Matt Baxter just took Justin Knight to the line. He wants to go run, 13, 20 something somewhere in the world. That's like, so it's really it's not that cool as the coach. You don't feel that. You don't feel that awesome being like, hey, dude, just go for a 40-minute run tomorrow. You know what I mean? But again, it's, you have that trust, and hopefully they're rolling in June again.
Yeah, you talked about before NCAAs, you guys didn't come down and do a normal, quote-unquote, taper, or I should say not normal, but a traditional taper. I myself am not a fan of the traditional taper, which is all the volume in the world and then start running really fast for 2 to 3 weeks out to get people, quote unquote, freshened up. I mean, Lydiard didn't really, that's I think where it came from, was this idea of Lydiard being like freshening up, but that taper was a taper from 100-mile weeks to like 80-mile weeks. So it's not really the application that people are interpreting it to be in this day and age. So, talk us a little bit through that, because I know my reasons for shying away from that reality, but I would love to hear.
I think it really parallels a lot of the ways I coach. It's just the test I give myself is, am I doing this because I think this is like just what you do, or I did this as an athlete or something, or do I really actually have reasons? Do I have is the human being in front of me telling me this is what to do? And so the taper to me, it's very. I don't know how else to say it. It's like very like 90s, like it's just old thinking. It's this old like, we're gonna pull you back to 40 miles a week thing. Like I wish that worked. I don't know. I think we have a lot of people. I would love to survey all 300 kids on that starting line and say, how many of you feel out of your minds the best you felt all season right here today? I bet like 20 of them do. And the other 280 said, I felt better in September, or I felt the same as I do in October, so just don't give me all this stuff about like we've got this thing mastered. I don't believe that for a second. So 48 hours before they ran that race, they did a 10-mile run.
Yeah, I mean, Josh McDougall, remember in the early 2000s, the day before NCAA, you went individually at Terre Haute. You ran a 10-mile run on the course.
Yeah. So we raced Saturday. Thursday morning, they did a 10-mile run. Friday.
That's normal for them, right? Like a 10-mile run is a normal thing to do, right?
Yeah. They don't think it's they don't exactly right. I mean, so
it's not a new stimulus. That's kind of my thing with the taper. It's like if you've been running and training at this stimulus threshold for the duration of these many weeks leading up to this championship meet, if you then all of a sudden pull off all this stimulus that you've been exposing to, and that's their homeostasis. Well, actually, it's a new stimulus now because it's lack of stimulus that they've gotten used to. Right? So all of a sudden, you're like, whoa, why is everyone flat and lethargic like we are in the middle of the off season when we're now layering new stimuli on?
Yeah.
So to me, it's just for some reason, like you said, it's well-intended thought, but the execution of it is very sloppy. It's actually junk.
Well, it's just like what we talked about going completely off for a break period, right? It's like whenever you kind of pull down the reins too much, it just, the body goes haywire because the body adapts to whatever it's given. It's like, John, you just said homeostasis. It's like whatever set point you're at, like that's where you're at. And if you deviate from that, it's a new stimulus, like you said. So, the only time I've ever seen a lot of success with a traditional quote unquote taper is if someone is fried going into it, right? And they need some sort of like drastic change to like bump them out of this like bad state they're in. And if that's the case, then okay, this might work. It's like your last minute, tool you pull out of the tool bag because you screwed things up. But
it's a Hail Mary.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
It gives them the emotional space more than anything.
Well, and a lot of times you look at this stuff, and I think it's a great, example of where we've kind of gone wrong is like the assumption is that like, hey, if we take this stress off them, then they're going to feel fresh. But that's not how the body adapts. We've established that. And the second part of it...
It's a misappropriation of this, periodization trend where now we're going to get this super mega, oh my gosh, the most incredible compensation ever. And it's like, definitely not.
But it doesn't work like that. And I think that's where, again, to hate on my people, science has really screwed us over because like all the research studies are on like these big tapers. But they're on, moderately trained individuals who don't do that much, right? And when you don't do that much, you're not adapted to something. And like I like to tell, people from team sports a lot of times is like that 10-mile run you guys did Thursday, like 10 miles easy for them. That's like going for a hour-long walk for me, right? If you're in shape, it's nothing.
Right. Well, it's within what you do consistently on a consistent basis for months and months and months and months.
Right. Yeah. We do this 10-mile run, and Baxter, the guys come back and they ran almost 11 actually. They were 10.8 miles, and I'm like, oh man, they just turned around at the wrong time. As we're in a new place, and Baxter, I'm just kind of like wondering what they're gonna say about kind of going a little bit long, and Baxter just said, man, it felt good just to get a nice longer run in, and that to me shows me how normal it is and how you're feeding them what's expected. So instead of us thinking 10-mile run, we just think like, no, we're keeping everything normal. Everything is normal. Everything is steady. I will say one other thing on the taper is we're really careful in the neuromuscular and how much we're turning over. So we know that we're going to ask them to. Steve, I credit you. That bit on muscle tension you have in your book was a really formative for me. And in my thinking of this stuff, of just how we, so that 10-mile run is part of it. We're gonna have them do some drills, some dynamic strides, things like that day before the race, and then we're really careful of what we're asking them to do in the 5-6 days prior to that from a neuromuscular standpoint. I just think that a lot of times we think we're getting closer to the race. we want to again this diamond shaped thing of sharpening, and so we start giving them all this fast crap. We did a lot of short treadmill hills this year, so 10 to 15 seconds. We did these weekly since August, 15 seconds at 15 degrees, and so they're actually not turning over that fast, and it's on an incline. But that was a way to just touch that kind of firing force from the glute there without asking them to really rip it on the track or rip it with some short, fast stuff. So we could keep things engaged without this, asking to go too fast, which I think potentially is what leaves you with that kind of dead leg feeling.
Well, and the tissues and the brain and the coordination is prepared. And that's the thing. You said months and months and months. You've been doing this for a long time. Right. So doing in some strides, doing that, the tissues and the organism is prepared to handle and incur the stress and not interpret the stress as something intense and new and different. It's part of its routine. It's part of, again, it meets a threshold of homeostasis, versus if you take it off, okay, that now is a new stimuli, or if you vastly accelerate it or do more volume of it. And I think prep speed is a good word, because prep speed, to me, to define it very precisely, is brand new speed work without any tissues prepared to do it. And that's what happens in a typical taper. People I'm working with, milers, it's November. We're doing flying 30s. We're doing flying 60s now in November. And they're sprinting year-round. Like, to talk about real quick, an athlete, Daniel Herrera, who's the national record holder for the 1 mile in Mexico now. This guy was a 402 miler coming out of UCLA. Never sprinted. Oh, Jamar, I can't sprint. I pull my calves. I go, Dan, I think you can sprint, but you just haven't been prepared to sprint. So it took about a good 6 months to prepare him to be able to consistently sprint. And he was doing acceleration ladders on the track in December of last year. He didn't open up his outdoor season. He didn't open up racing until April 1st. But then this guy ran, for the first time, under 4. He ran under 4 3 times in 3 different months on the track. He started 29 races. He paced a couple, but finished, out of the ones he wasn't pacing, 24 races. His calendar of racing was April 1st to October 1st. No injuries, none of this. What were we doing? We were sprinting. I mean, his last workout was 4 times 250, at max speed. max effort. And it was fine, and it was good. And he did this before his final race, about 5-6 days. Why? We've been doing that for, almost a year. Right. So I think sometimes, again, we shy away from, as distance coaches, speed, because we apply it or we subject the stimulus at the wrong time of year, and then the tissues aren't prepared, the central nervous system isn't ready to coordinate it at those velocities, and it's this huge tax. And I know, for me, my general rule of thumb is any type of intense CNS work, where it's a heavy lift or speed work, I give a minimum 72 hours for that system to reboot, because it's delicate. It's really delicate. And sometimes, again, we think, we'll get them real sharp on Tuesday and the race is on Saturday, and they're flat.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it all comes down to that experience thing a little bit, knowing your athletes and knowing what makes them flat or not. We talk a lot about this science stuff. We talk about these different ideas, but it really kind of comes down to that. Like, do they feel flat or not? And if they feel flat, then like what you did going into those, that weekdays leading into it wasn't the right thing to do. And I think as coaches, like, a lot of times, like, that's where that data in the season comes from, is like, a lot of times we keep track of that stuff on, hey, how do you feel? Did you feel flat out there? Okay, I did. Like, whatever I did going into this race, I need to adjust that come championship season, or try this different thing next time if I want them to feel good.
Right. Love it, guys.
Well, I think to wrap up, Mike, I got one final question. Maybe Steve has one as the culminating one. But, you talked a lot about emotional control, confidence, having a plan, being very thorough in your preparation and analysis of this season. What I'm curious is for you to maybe talk about the doubt. that might have come up? Because, as much as we like to think it's all a Cinderella story and you had this perfect plan and everything went to perfection, I know there were some rocky roads in adversities. And the thing about life is we can't control what adversities we're subject to, but we can control how we respond to those adversities. So for you as a coach, walk us through your moments of doubt this season and how you coped and who you surround yourself with as your support network to help you with those shadow moments where you thought all was lost and everything was down the tubes.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because again, it's so easy after something goes well to be sitting around talking about how we planned all this out and this and that. And, it's I was telling our guys on the way home from nationals, hey, look, a meet like this, when it goes well, a lot of times we don't head back and then say what did I do well, what can I do better. We don't have that kind of reflection. It's usually after something that doesn't go well, we really go back to the drawing board and really rethink things. And I challenged them, said, hey, if this went well for you, and it certainly went well for our team, but if it went well for you individually, I still challenge you to reflect on how we got here. And so I do the same thing as a coach. When I go back to it, I will start with saying this: a big breakthrough for me, or something that was different for me this time than other times, is I wrote the training maybe June or July of what we would do until November, and I trusted it, and I didn't every time something was up rethink it. And that's a really fine line of being fluid and adaptable. It's not to say that you're not open to change, but I will say that I trusted it, and I didn't completely reinvent the wheel every time I got skittish about something. And I that was definitely different for me, as I was really committed to what I had drawn up. But I will say that there were a couple moments, and I'll tell you about them. I was still mastering. I was coming from DC, coming from Georgetown. We had, Reagan Airport is 10 minutes from campus. Well, Phoenix Airport, Flagstaff, is 2.5 hours from campus. And so I was, I think, not taking into account what the travel was potentially doing to these guys. So we go to Louisville end of September, and we come back. And typically for me is, hey, if we race, the thing we do on the next Tuesday or the next workout is we'll do something aerobic, so not a big muscular stress coming off a race. So we race on Saturday, get in at midnight after traveling all day. We race, travel all day Saturday, get them in at midnight, so they wake up Sunday, they feel like hell, and they go for a jog. And Mondays we got class, we get a long practice. Tuesday, I go to give them something long aerobic, and I mean, we were like 100%, like everyone was just off. Either they couldn't do it, or our good, our guys that are most seasoned veterans, they could do it. It just cost them way too much for what you wanted it to. It's like one of these things, like on a scale of 1 to 10, there should be like a 4, and there's like an 8, and I'm just like, what is going, and that really spooked me. But it was the travel. It was just like, okay, this isn't DC where they race and they're home in 2 hours. It was like, I mean, the travel just crushed them. So that was a change I made throughout the season. Is I canceled. I want to say coming off the conference meet, I canceled a bunch of training, and it kind of freaked out the guys. A bunch of guys were like, "Are you sure about this?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're not doing stuff just to do it." So sometimes there were things that I think that were just me being new to NAU and new to Flagstaff that I was trying to learn there. We had a guy miss a couple weeks of training in the middle of the season. Jordy Beamish, he finished 40th for us. He was our fifth man, and he missed a couple weeks in the season. Right after Wisconsin, he had a calf injury, and yeah, I mean, he went like 10 days zero running in there, and at that point, you're looking at who we got Corey coming on. Pete is coming off of finishing 40-something in Wisconsin. Luis is a freshman. It's like, it changes the game not having Jordy. Jordy's run 341, 1350. So it's just that was a little alarming. And also I knew that our guys were putting in a lot of work. They had put in a lot of work. The summer we had, outside of Jordy, we really didn't have injuries, so we didn't have any other interruptions. And I think if you're asking about doubt, it's like, all right, we were pretty good in September. I think, I think we can hold it, but certainly you see a lot of people that, that's still, November's a long way to go. So there were some times in there where I was like, man, I wish we were maybe coming on a little bit later from what I'm seeing in training. I wish maybe that was stuff I was seeing in September, I was seeing more in October. But again, I think that just goes back to being really careful with what you're asking them kind of emotionally.
That's fantastic. I think we'll end it right there, because I think that's an important message to have, because as both of you guys mentioned, is a lot of times after wins we kind of gloss over and forget about the struggles or the doubts and all those things that come up. And as a coach, I think it's really refreshing to hear some of those things, because it's very tempting when you're going through those to be like, crap, like we're not going to hit our goal because everything didn't go perfectly. But making your way through some of that reality of winning NCAAs versus the fairy tale of it is hopefully a good message to send.
Yeah, and Mike, I just want to say thank you and congrats. Like when I looked at the results, and a big smile broke over my face to see a friend and a colleague, very well deserved, standing on your own 2 feet. Doing something that's difficult to do, get the baton and torch passed from you from a great coach in Eric Hines and a great program, and maintain that engine and the fuel to keep it going, and not just repeat, but repeat in a very dominant fashion. And I mean, all hats off to Portland and BYU and all the other NCAA schools out there. Syracuse, they're good schools. I mean, these are great coaches, and just couldn't think of a more person and program deserving. So again, congrats, and thanks again for coming on here not once but twice, just like the back-to-back titles.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Steve. I want to say thanks to you guys. I think what we have as far as our collaboration on things, I want to hash out ideas with you guys, before we won this thing and long after, and I just think that collaboration that we have and that support is what makes coaching really special. And we're gonna keep doing that throughout each of our successes. So thanks for being my colleagues in it.
It's a privilege.
Yep. Thanks, Mike.